Kyle Shanahan should have deferred the ball in overtime in the Super Bowl, but it may not be for the reason why you think. Let's talk about that. So, I admittedly have not been posting as much as I could have on this YouTube channel. I apologize for that. I was out of town for a couple weeks, and I'm back. I'm back on the grind. Happy to make some content. And the Super Bowl occurred while I was gone. I watched a Chinese stream of it, so I did not see any of Tony Romo's commentary that was plighted. I did not see the halftime show or the national anthem. But and frankly, I haven't seen a lot of the discourse from the Super Bowl. But I've got some opinions. I saw the whole, well, about three-quarters of the game. Missed a little bit of the third and fourth quarter, but most of the game. And I've got some opinions, especially about the overtime rules that I think have been talked about a lot for not a lot of reason. So basically, if you're not familiar, the overtime rules changed for the playoffs. In the regular season, the first team to get the ball in the overtime could score a touchdown and win the game. The other team might not get the ball back. But in the playoffs, if that first team scores a touchdown, the second team has an opportunity to match. If they do better by getting the 2-point conversion, then they win. If they don't get the touchdown, they lose. If they get exactly 7 to match, then the ball goes back to the first team. Next score wins, sudden death. And I like the rule a lot more. I understand why it can't be around in the regular season because you just have games that were too long. I mean, that this game lasted 5 full quarters essentially. But I like the rule change for the playoffs. I don't think it's necessarily complicated. But apparently it was because several San Francisco 49ers players, including Kyle Juszczyk, who, I mean, if I'm Kyle Shanahan, I just tell him to shut his mouth because it just looks bad on everyone involved. Said that the 49ers did not discuss the new overtime rules and that their assumption was just that they wanted the ball to score a touchdown and win the game and that it was like the regular season. Whereas the Chiefs, on the other hand, had meetings about it multiple times throughout the playoffs. And on the surface level, that looks really bad. It doesn't take more than 2 minutes for you to explain to your team, this is what we're thinking, this is what I think, this is what I'm going to call given the situation. And Kyle Shanahan chose to keep the ball, just like he would have in the regular season. So that part doesn't really matter. The part that would have been kind of like dumbfounding is if they had scored a touchdown. Because the 49ers players seemingly would have reacted like they had just won the game if they thought the rules were the same as what they were in the regular season. And that's where you kind of got to know what you're doing. It doesn't take but 2 minutes for you to sit down with the team and explain it, just how I just explained it at the start of this video. Simple. And you could say, if you're Kyle Shanahan, say, I want the ball because if we match their score or if they match our score, whatever, I want to have the ball third, be able to go down and score a field goal and win the game or a touchdown, right? That's an understandable viewpoint, understandable thought process. So the players not knowing, I mean, that's unfortunate. That looks bad. That's something that shouldn't happen, but it's not the end of the world. The end of the world, in my opinion, is Kyle Shanahan's miscalculation. First of all, a lot of people blame this on analytics, and analytics tells you some sort of thing relating to this, but I think it's such a catch-all word that we use for garbage we don't understand. At the end of the day, there's not a lot of data that shows what teams do in these rules because they're recently instituted. This was instituted because Josh Allen never got the ball for the Buffalo Bills against the Kansas City Chiefs a few years ago in the playoffs, and they lost the game because of a coin toss, essentially, because Patrick Mahomes drove the field and scored a touchdown. So we don't have a lot of data on this. This is not analytics making this decision. This is logic, reason, maybe the efficiency of the offenses and the defenses, and looking at the game where it had been so far. And so if you look at the game where it had been so far, maybe you believe in the 49ers' ability to stop the Chiefs because the Chiefs had not scored a lot of points in the game. And it took a Christian McCaffrey fumble and a punt that a lot of people say was muffed, but really it just hit the player's leg. I mean, that's not a muffed punt. We need to be serious about our discourse here. But nonetheless, it took a lot of circumstances for the Chiefs to get to that number and to tie the 49ers. The missed extra point, or should I say blocked extra point, of course, a part of that as well. So you could make the argument that Kyle Shanahan did the right thing and that he could, if he scored the field goal, which did end up doing, he could trust his defense to hold. But at the end of the day, on the other side, there's Patrick Mahomes. And if Patrick Mahomes needs a touchdown to win, yeah, you have to feel good about it. And I know that 49ers had a fourth down situation where one play could have ended the game if they could have stopped Mahomes. But you saw Andy Reid was more aggressive with the play calling. You saw Patrick Mahomes was more aggressive with his legs than he was during the regular season because this was for all the marbles. And when he's like that, he's easily one of the top five greatest quarterbacks of all time. And I think, and I said this last year before he won this Super Bowl, obviously, I think if he wins a couple more, he's got a firm stance at being the greatest of all time. And he's at three now by age 28, which is where Brady was. And Brady went, what, about 10 years before he won his next one with New England. If Patrick Mahomes wins two of the next five, I think we could seriously have a conversation. And so giving him the ball in overtime, that's a stressful feeling, especially when all they need is a touchdown. Uh, that sounds ridiculous because they struggled to score touchdowns throughout the playoffs and their defense buoyed them. But it's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time and one of the greatest 2 minute quarterbacks, one of the greatest late game situation quarterbacks of all time. You just don't want to give him the ball back. But here's why I think the decision by Shanahan was stupid. Because at the end of the day, they kicked the field goal and they gave the ball back to Patrick Mahomes. That looks stupid because Patrick Mahomes won the game, right? In retrospect, maybe they should have gone for it on fourth down. I don't know. In retrospect, maybe they should have deferred. The reason they should have deferred is because the Kansas City Chiefs were going for two. Let's say the 49ers scored a touchdown. The only thing to do there is to kick the extra point, take the safe point. Now you give the ball back to Patrick Mahomes with the ability to do the exact same thing he just did. And so if he does the exact same thing he just did, then goes for two, they win the game. They don't give the ball back to the 49ers. If I'm the Chiefs, that's an easy decision to make. I'm going for two 100% of the time. I'm trusting Patrick Mahomes to get me 2 yards before I'm trusting my defense to hold San Francisco, not to a field goal, but to 0 points. When with kickoff rules the way they are, starting at the 25, I mean, that's an easy decision to make. What the Chiefs have to go, what, 50 yards? Not even 40 yards to get a Harrison Butker field. I mean, sorry, the 49ers to get a Moody field goal. It's probably like 40, 50 yards more than Harrison Butker, that's for sure. But not only do you do that, you also give the Chiefs, which we saw, 4 downs to play with when you take the ball first. You have 3 downs because you want to save the fourth for a punt, but the Chiefs don't need to punt. They need to go for the touchdown to win the game. So they're going for it on fourth down. And so if Shanahan scored the touchdown like he was hoping, he kept the ball, he scored the touchdown, he got the extra point, whatever. And the extra point's not guaranteed, by the way, with the situation we had today or that day with the kicking. He gave the ball back to Patrick Mahomes, and they are 100% going for two. And I love their chances to go for two. I mean, you saw they scored the touchdown. So, I mean, that's what happened. You're telling me that you wouldn't rather take Patrick Mahomes? Like if we're ranking the likelihood of changes, making the 49ers score a touchdown was a lot harder than making Patrick Mahomes get a 2 point conversion. So from the start, I think Kyle Shanahan's logic was not the worst thing in the world, but it's absolutely the wrong decision in my mind. Um, and last thing I want to say on this, I mean, well, a few things. First of all, congrats to the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, one of the greatest of all time. Andy Reid's going down as one of the greatest coaches of all time. Both of them are going to be first ballot Hall of Famers, even if they retired tomorrow. Happy that Andy Reid's given it another shot next year to go for the 3P. They're a dynasty, and there's nothing more you could say about that. But one thing I want to say about San Francisco is the narrative is Kyle Shanahan can't win the big game, or he fired Steve Wilkes as a scapegoat. You know, he blows the big lead, whatever. It's such a media narrative, and I really can't stand it. I'm a guy who sits on here on a YouTube channel and produces content, produces media relating to sports. And even though I do that, I hate so much of the narrative in media today. It's just to get eyes and talking points and not actual authentic conversation. We said the same thing about Andy Reid when he had Donovan McNabb as his quarterback in Philadelphia, and he went to the Super Bowl, what, once or twice, and I believe it was 4 straight NFC championship games. He could never win the big game, and it took him 15 years to have the right quarterback in Kansas City to do that, and he's done 3 in 5 years. So you're telling me Kyle Shanahan, at the age of what is he, 40 something, can't win the big game because he lost one Super Bowl as offensive coordinator, which a fair play. I think he did lose that Super Bowl. That's his fault. The next Super Bowl, I'm never going to blame him for. He took Jimmy Garoppolo to the Super Bowl and went against Patrick Mahomes. Like Jimmy Garoppolo just got suspended 2 games for performance enhancing drugs and is one of the worst players. No offense to him, but one of the worst players to ever use performance enhancing drugs. And he got benched by the Raiders for Aiden O'Connell, and Aiden O'Connell's now probably not going to be their starter next year. They need a quarterback. I think they're going to take one in this draft, and I'm going to have a mock draft out later today, so subscribe. But he took Jimmy Garoppolo to the Super Bowl in that one. Now, this one, you could say overtime rules, whatever. They didn't run the ball in the fourth quarter. I think that certainly hurt them. They didn't really get their weapons involved as much as I would have liked them to. Say what you want about Brock Purdy at quarterback. I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm not going to say Kyle Shanahan can't win the big game. And as for firing of Steve Wilkes, I mean, the 49ers defense was not good all year. That defensive backfield is awful. And they're certainly going to take a corner in the early picks in this draft. I had them taking Quinyon Mitchell in my early mock drafts. I had them taking Cameron Kitchens at the safety position out of Miami in one of my early mock drafts. They're going to go in the defense because they need help on the backfield. And as much talent as they have up front with Bosa and Chase Young, we'll see if he resigns. As much talent as they have in the linebacker core, Dre Greenlaw and his injury really hurt them in that game. You could tell. Um, and Fred Warner, their defensive backfield needs help. And so letting go of Steve Wilkes, I don't know. Was it a decision based on only the Super Bowl? No. And I think it's ridiculous to look at this and say it's such a lazy take to say, oh, well, Steve Wilkes is not the problem for why you lost to Patrick Mahomes. He only let them score whatever, 20 points. I forgot what the number was off the top of my head. It's Kyle Shanahan's fault. He's firing him because he lost the big game. It's Steve Wilkes' defense was playing for the whole year. And at the end of the day, you could see he wasn't bringing out the best of the guys. And I'm not going to say anybody deserves to get fired ever. As my Brooklyn Nets fired Jock Vaughn this morning, a head coach who I think is one of the more likely candidates to deserve to get fired. But I'm never going to call for someone's job on a platform. That's a better way to say it. I'm never going to sit up here and say, fire him. He needs to be fired. But I'm going to be logical and say that Steve Wilkes probably could have seen this coming. And I don't know who Kyle Shanahan brings in, but he's had a pretty good run at defensive coordinators to this point. So we'll see what he does in terms of recruiting someone to fill that position. Let me know what you think of the Super Bowl in the comments below. What do you think of my take about Kyle Shanahan and deferring the ball? I think I'm pretty confident he should have deferred in overtime. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I appreciate your support. Thanks for watching this Quick Thoughts episode. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.